It's going to end at, well, the petitioner will explain about the current one as well, but no, it will stop at November 15th. It was meant to be a pilot, and it was meant to have a start time and an end time. At that point, we would reevaluate and decide where to go from there. But the resolution before you is really asking to a couple of things. One is to pause moving forward with e-scooters until both the state and our local transportation board have had an opportunity to promulgate regulations and and rules for an e-scooter program. And the second part is also to ask our legislative delegation to work at the State House in order to make sure that Brookline, if we move forward, and that's not a for certain, we're still taking public comment, that should it go forward, that Brookline would maintain its local authority over our sidewalks. And before I turn it over to the petitioner of this warrant article, I'd like to introduce my subcommittee. So, or we can, or have my members introduce themselves. It's better.
I'm Elisa. Are you on? Hello. I'm Elisa Jonas, and I'm from Precinct 16, and I'm a member of the Public Safety Subcommittee of the Advisory Committee.
Yeah. And
What could you still couldn't hear, right?
I think.
Yeah. Well, I'm Elisa Jonas. I'm from Precinct 16, and I'm a member of the Public Safety Subcommittee.
I'm Susan Granoff, Precinct 7, and also a member of the Advisory Committee and this subcommittee.
David Mark Goldstein, Precinct 8, Town Meeting Member and Advisory.
And again, I'm the Janice Kahn, chair of the subcommittee, and I'm from Precinct 15. So I'd like to introduce the petitioner. Paul,
Thank you.
why don't you start? Introduce yourself.
Sure. So I have some prepared remarks. Hopefully I'll be able to get through those. So good evening. My name is Paul Warren. I'm a Precinct 1 town meeting member, and along with Select Board member Heather Hamilton, I'm a co-sponsor of this warrant article. I'd like to thank Chairperson Kahn for scheduling this hearing and for the attendees for participating. I know for me it's a night out, right, away from the kids. I am a stay-at-home dad with a 2-year-old, so anytime I can put on a clean white shirt that doesn't have a stain on it, I'm happy. So, but before getting to specific of the warrant article, I'd like to take a few minutes to provide some background in context on e-scooters. E-scooters are part of a broad category of lightweight electric vehicles, commonly referred to as micromobility. These devices come in a variety of electric-powered platforms, including scooters, skateboards, unicycles, hoverboards, and bicycles. And there's going to be more coming, I assume. Proponents of shared scooters and micromobility include transportation and climate planners and equity advocates for the potential of these devices to reduce auto congestion and emissions, and for increasing access to affordable transportation. Detractors have a variety of concerns, including the impact that sidewalk usage and parking have on pedestrian safety, and the risk of operator injury due to the lack of helmet usage and underage operators. And there's a whole slew of more issues too. I wanted to highlight those. Micromobility is, in particular, e-scooters are often associated with shared rental services, such as those being offered by Lime and Bird as part of Brookline's pilot program. Increasingly, however, these devices are being privately purchased and operated on Brookline's public ways and in the surrounding region. Because these devices can and do cross municipal borders, micromobility is a regional transportation issue. As an example, a scooter rented in Cambridge may be driven through Brookline and dropped off in Boston at Longwood. Issues related to helmets, liability, sidewalk operation, maximum speeds, and drop-off zones need to be coordinated across municipalities. How does Brookline enforce designated parking areas, often referred to as corrals, if the scooter vendor has a contract with Cambridge or Boston and not Brookline? Many of the operational conditions and requirements are written into the license agreement with the specific municipality. This is a unique transportation challenge that requires both regional and local solutions. To address the regional aspects of micromobility, Brookline has been working with the Massachusetts Area Planning Council, participating in a regional planning effort with Boston, Cambridge, Watertown, and Newton to develop a regulatory and coordinated operating framework for these devices. As the popularity of micromobility grows, and it's important I include e-scooters in micromobility, as does everybody else, there will be an increasing number of these devices, both shared and privately owned, on our public ways. Even if Brookline chooses to not contract with a vendor to offer rental locations in Brookline, these devices are coming no matter what we do. They'll be driven into Brookline across the BU Bridge, across Park Drive on Beacon, and down Com Ave from Newton. Getting our regulatory house in order is an important early step to safely integrating these devices onto our public ways. Now about our regulations. At the state level, e-scooters are covered under Mass General Law, Chapter 90, Section 1, which defines a motorized scooter as a two-wheel, tandem, or three-wheeled device that has handlebars, designed to be stood or sat upon by the operator, powered by an electric or gas-powered motor that is capable of propelling the device with or without human propulsion. Chapter 90, Section 1E requires that motorized scooters have turn signals, and the operator possess a valid driver's license or learner's permit, and the operator must wear a helmet. There is confusion and ambiguity at the state level. According to a January 22nd, 2019 Boston.com article, officials in Cambridge and Somerville cited Chapter 90, the statute Chapter 90, last summer when they ordered the scooter sharing company Bird to cease operation in their cities. Boston officials have said the decades-old law, which was originally intended to regulate faster gas-powered scooters like Vespas, is a significant hurdle for their efforts to bring scooters to their streets. In a September 18, 2018 Boston.com article, it was reported that the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, in reference to e-scooters, concluded that the existing laws likely were not intended to address the regulate these specific types of vehicles. Joe Barr, Cambridge's transportation director, agrees with respect to the intent of the law. However, the article reports that Barr says it's hard to argue that the statute doesn't apply to scooters as well. And Nancy Glowa, the city solicitor for Cambridge, is reported in the same article to hold the opinion that these devices are captured by state law, regardless of what the intent was. Brookline has based its pilot in part on the communication from the Department of Transportation. In an effort to clarify the law and to make way for e-scooters, the Commonwealth has several bills that have been introduced at the state level, including one by the governor, another sponsored by Reps. Moran and Vitolo, and several other bills by various representatives. These bills cover a wide range of issues, including the definition of a scooter, insurance, taxes, helmets, sidewalk operations, parking, and equipment requirements, to name a few. At the local level, Brookline level, the Transportation Board has exclusive jurisdiction and authority to regulate our sidewalks. In fact, I had originally filed this warrant article as a modification to our existing sidewalk bylaw and was informed by town council that town meeting does not have any authority to change the laws regarding our sidewalks. This exclusive regulatory right was given to the Transportation Board when Brookline adopted Chapter 317 of the Acts of 1974, which created both the Transportation Department and the Transportation Board. To date, the Transportation Board has not held any public hearings nor developed rules and regulations to govern these devices on our public ways and sidewalks. There are two existing Brookline regulations that I'd like to bring to your attention that are relevant to this topic. First is Section 15 of Article 7 of the Transportation Department's Rules and Regulations, which limits the operation of vehicles on sidewalks. Since mid-September, the Brookline Police Department has been using this regulation to justify stopping people driving scooters on sidewalks. In a meeting I had with the transportation administrator, he agreed that this was not a perfect fit, but was good enough for now to get us through the pilot, which is due to end November 15th. The second regulation that is in our general bylaws, it's Section 7.5.11, which prohibits sidewalk obstructions. Things like 2x4s and coal, I think, are mentioned in it. To my knowledge, this bylaw is not being enforced to either write citations or remove e-scooters from sidewalks when they're blocking the pedestrian way. Now on to our pilot. Brookline's e-scooter program was launched to help the town collect information and data to evaluate the benefits and costs of proceeding with a permanent program. Based on usage data and user survey results supplied by the vendors, the pilot program indicates that demand is high for shared e-scooter services in Brookline. The level of reported demand and replaced automobile trips appears to be consistent with what has been reported by other communities that have developed shared e-scooter services. The pilot program has also highlighted a number of challenges that are also consistent with media reports from other locations using e-scooters around the country. In particular, the operation and parking of scooters on sidewalks has raised concerns with pedestrians, and in particular the elderly, disabled, and the very young. These concerns include the risk of injury from collision, as well as tripping and fall hazards from improperly parked e-scooters. Additionally, issues including underage operators, lack of helmets, compliance, and liability insurance have also been raised. You're probably going to hear some more about those issues tonight. Now about the Warrant Article. This Warrant Article does not take a position on whether shared e-scooter services should be permanently deployed in Brookline. I want to repeat that. This Warrant Article does not take a position on whether shared e-scooter services should be permanently deployed in Brookline. What it does do is ask the Select Board to postpone such a decision until state and local laws and regulations catch up with the technology. Specifically, the first resolution of this Warrant Article asks the Select Board to postpone additional piloting or the permanent deployment of e-scooters and other micromobility devices until the state legislature updates and clarifies its existing laws, and until the Brookline Transportation Board holds public hearings and develops rules and regulations to govern the use of these devices in Brookline. The second resolution of this warrant article urges our state legislative delegation to work with the legislature to ensure that in any legislation that is passed, Brookline retains the local control to regulate its sidewalks with respect to the use and operation of these devices. I do want to emphasize something. Setting regulations is not the end to this issue. It really is just the start. We also need follow-on investments in enforcement, education, and infrastructure. In closing, I want to share with you a story. I was once an avid cyclist. I rode my bike everywhere. All that stopped 5 years ago when I was taken by ambulance to Beth Israel Hospital after being hit by an out-of-state motorist on Park Drive at Riverway. I was riding my bike in a poorly configured roadway with no clearly marked or protected bike lane, and the driver was unfamiliar in an urban environment. The driver suffered from the experience of having hit me. I've not ridden a bike since. Not because of the physical damage, but because of the psychological damage that was done to me. It destroyed my confidence on a bike. Now, imagine the impact that a collision with a moving scooter or damaging fall to an improperly parked scooter must have on the elderly, disabled, or very young pedestrian. I have many choices on how I travel around Brookline. For many in Brookline, walking is the only choice. When we take away the confidence of these groups to navigate familiar and once safe pathways, on our sidewalks, by not protecting those sidewalks, we limit their freedom. Warrant Article 16 was born out of a desire to protect pedestrians, especially the elderly, disabled, and the very young. In my opinion, it could be considered a companion article to Warrant Article 31, which in part calls for accelerated investments in protected infrastructure for both pedestrians and users of mobility services. Warrant Article 16 puts Brookline on a path of keeping everyone healthy and safe, and I would urge the committee to vote positive action on Warrant Article 16. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just, for those who've just entered, I've arranged for BIG to televise this public hearing so that those who are not able to attend in person might be able to catch it on our local public access. Do you have any questions at this point, or should we go to comments? Okay. Also, there is a member of the, what?
Oh, I do have a
Oh,
question.
yes.
I just wanted to get clarification. You said that the Transportation Board has exclusive jurisdiction and authority to regulate our sidewalks. Have you included that as part of this packet? The granting of this?
It does not include the lengthy chapter 317. I'd be happy to follow up with you.
Yes,
That was it was emailed to me by Jocelyn Murphy, Town Council, and I'd be happy to forward that to you.
Okay, and also I'd like to know, I would also like to get the whatever legal basis for the fact that town meeting does not have the authority to change laws governing our sidewalk. Okay, so you will.
So just to be clear, I originally was going to file a modification to our sidewalk bylaw. I sent that warrant article to Town Council, and she replied and said, town meeting has no authority to do this. You need to go through the Transportation Board. And that was her opinion. She sent me
Right.
She sent me the specific language in law that
Okay.
backs it up. So I will forward that to you.
It would also be helpful to get a copy of the town council's opinion.
I'll forward your email, and then the attachment
Right.
is her.
That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. So the Transportation Board gets its authority from the state. So just to be clear, that's not something that we regulate in the town. I'd also like to introduce, we have also a member of our police force who's from the Traffic Division. So who's here also, and you're Mr. Canny.
Yeah, my name is Sergeant John Canny. I work in the Traffic Division and am one of the liaisons as far as the pilot program for scooters.
So I want to thank you for being here to listen to the comments as well. So at this point, I'd like to open up the public hearing to public comment. And, well, Heather, Heather Hamilton is the co-petitioner of this article and also a sitting member of our select board.
My apologies. I was at another hearing downstairs. I just want to let you know that I am a select board member and we voted on the pilot. Basically, what I found is there's a lot of misinformation out there about the pilot program, and this was a way to really kind of clarify that the pilot was intended for a period of time and will not be going past November 15th. So afterwards, we'll review all the information that we got as a result of the pilot program, all of the emails that have come in, all of the data that we've collected from the companies. So thank you so much for holding this hearing.
Yes.
I have a
Thank you,
question.
Heather. Well,
I have a question for Heather. You mentioned that there was a survey of users of the rental bicycles during this pilot program period. Is there also going to be a survey, a public survey of the community related to the pilot program so that you could get input about how this has impacted them?
So the intention is to have a survey. It has not been conducted yet. I think we're going to do that next month or maybe even in November, right before the end of the pilot. The intention is to go beyond just surveying users. I was at the senior center and somebody had a great idea to include non-user groups because those people are affected too, even more so. So we're looking at how to make sure that a lot of stakeholders get the survey once we draft. So that'll be coming. And I'll be reaching out to the senior center definitely and some of the other groups that have been working with us during this pilot program.
Yes.
With regard to the survey, do we have the data anywhere? Is that available online? For example, the level of reported demand and replaced automobile trips.
So Todd, I think weekly sends out a Twitter update that has the number of trips total since the launch date and average length of the trip. Those two things have really been a great insight for us. I wanted to see whether or not there was demand for this kind of device. And considering that we're an island in an area that doesn't allow scooters past our borders, the fact that we've hit 150,000 trips tells me that there is something bigger going on. So we need to be ready for when the state law is modified, because these scooters will be coming in from Boston and elsewhere.
Right, now I'm not questioning that. I was just wondering if we have access to the data specifically on the replacement of automobile trips.
So I think Bird did a user survey back in May or June. They reported that 20% of trips replaced an automobile, 21% connected someone with public transit.
And
We're
was-
going to be doing our own user survey to verify that data.
I also have
Yes.
some questions about this. Do we have any data about the number of auto or truck trips that were required on a daily basis to pick up the parked rental scooters?
I don't think I have that information readily available, but we could probably request it in a more permanent program.
And as part of the survey of the community, will you be asking whether any community members who typically are pedestrians have started to use cars in lieu of walking because of concerns with scooters?
We can certainly include that kind of question in the survey. We'll definitely be using the advisory committees through the Transportation Board, the bicycling one, the pedestrian one, and public transportation to get out to as many people as possible.
And finally, you mentioned that there were 150,000 trips to date. How many individual users are there?
I know that each company is a little different. They are in excess of 17,000, I believe.
Okay. This is combined
No, per company.
and how many companies are that? Just two?
So I'm
or-
relying primarily on Lime and Bird's data. We approved Spin in August, but they've been very slow to ramp up, so they don't have as much robust data as the other two.
Thank you, Heather. Yes, so there is a sign-up sheet in the back, but I know that some people need to leave. Oh, okay, fine. Well, it's really just an attendance list. I think that we can just have an orderly going to the mic. So if you'd like to go, please.
My name is Ellen Gold. I live at 7 Chatham Street. I've been a member of this community at that house for 42 years. I think scooters are coming. I don't think anybody in this room should pretend that there isn't going to be alternative transportation. I support this article that Paul and Heather have because what's most important to me is enforcement. My husband is in a wheelchair, and I take him out for a ride, walking around Longwood Mall, which is where we live. Twice we've been grazed by scooters on the sidewalks. I called up the Attorney General's office because I was pretty darn mad the second time, and was told that because there aren't any regulations, that to make an ADA complaint about the scooters, it's incredibly difficult. Paul made it sound simple, more or less, by his presentation, but I can assure you, I looked into this. This is a very complex area of sidewalks. And so I decided to wait. So what I'm here to do is to certainly urge this warrant article to pass, because we need strong and enforceable regulations. I've talked to a couple of policemen, one who I flagged down after the second time we were grazed on the sidewalk. And, they can't do anything. You can't give them a $250 ticket for being on the sidewalk. There's nothing to do to enforce anything right now. So, since this is coming, I would urge everyone to support the warrant article. But more than that, start thinking about how you can make laws that are enforceable and actually have a penalty so that people aren't on the sidewalks. If there's a $200 penalty for being on the sidewalk and the police officer gets them, I don't think that's going to happen very often. And I think as we look at this, that's really important. The other thing that I wanted to say is that I have called Bird and Lime a number of times. I have gotten out of my car to move scooters for people. I have taken scooters off the sidewalk for people who are in electric wheelchairs. And I have been on the phone with them. It takes maybe 30 minutes. Now, I did talk to Todd about this, and I suggested that if we're going to do this, then there has to be some way for the community, when there is a scooter blocking the sidewalk, to pick up the phone and call someone, not waiting 20, 25 minutes, and having that scooter removed. As it is, I can remove the scooters, Sometimes I want to throw them into the street. I don't do it. I was told that I shouldn't do that by a policeman. But I think that it's about how we think about this going forward, since we know, unfortunately, it is going to go forward. The other thing I would like to say is the racing that they do around Longwood Mall and Monmouth Court, because Precinct 1 really has it bad. I mean, if you're at the other side, if you're in South Brookline, you don't know. But we have scooter races on the weekends. I think that the police will tell you, I think that there was the scooter gang that went down Route 9, Yeah, and they can also go down Beacon Street. It affects Precinct 1, I think, and up Beacon Street to Cleveland Circle probably more than any other part of Brookline. But I think that's all I want to say, and I hope you do. I hope the warrant article passes, and I hope we have some very productive conversation about what meaningful regulation of the sidewalks and of scooters means, as opposed to just letting us get run over. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. I promise you will all have a chance to talk.
I'm Janet Gelbard. I'm a member of the advisory committee, and a resident of Precinct 2 on St. Paul Street, where we also have many issues. But I don't want to address those because I think all of you will. My purpose here tonight is to raise an unintended consequence. We keep talking about scooters and all of these things as a transportation issue, which they definitely are. But they are also a recreational issue. They are all over the parks. I am a recreational pedestrian. I walk the Emerald Necklace almost every day, and now there are scooters whizzing by. Some of the parks are beyond the control of Brookline, and I'm glad we're working with the Mass Association. However, there are parks in Brookline where they're just tearing through at Amory Park, right around that tiny little sidewalk on the outside of the sanctuary. So obviously this is well beyond the scope of this warrant article, but if we're talking about what we're going to need going forward, we can't just leave it with transportation. We need to include the recreational people too. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment.
Just so, because I didn't read the warrant article, so just to let you know that the warrant article actually reads, it says that the Transportation Board holds public hearings and regulations regarding the operation of parking of e-scooters and other micromobility devices on public sidewalks, public paths, and parks. Okay? Okay, I'm sorry. I should have read that.
Thank you. Joyce, could you? Okay. Joyce, please come. And next.
I have some questions.
Okay. Thank you.
Speaking of the problems people are
You
having.
can introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm Joyce Joyce, Town Meeting member from Precinct 9, and I live on Winchester Street. Lots of traffic. Now we have cars, bicycles, and scooters. So my questions are, if I witness or I am involved in something with a scooter and they leave, how do I identify them? The scooters don't have any large identifying marks, so I could say to the company who had the scooter, or the police could say to the company, who had your scooter at 5:30? There's no identifying marks. I think that's important. I mean, for me to go on a harangue about elderly walking, blocking the sidewalk, I mean, we've all done that. But these are my issues. When I find a scooter on my property, leaning on my bushes, breaking them, can I consider it abandoned property and take?
They're doing it elsewhere.
No, I know that. I know that. That's how this jumped into my head. The sidewalks on my street are this wide. A person in a wheelchair, rolling a stroller, that's it. I mean, my husband and I can walk as a couple, but when someone's coming towards us, we're single file. Why aren't the scooters on the tree lane public property? Nobody's walking on the tree lane. That's another thing that I think we have to have a way. I'm not going to pick up one of those heavy scooters and move it. I want immediately, I want my sidewalk clear. I want my neighbors who have little kids and the kids are running. So identification is my primary.
Yep.
The abandoned, I shouldn't call them abandoned. They are meant to be left and picked up. But it has to be clear. The companies have to, if the company gets a complaint about scooter number 745 and they know who rented it, there has to be fines. They have left them in the wrong place. They were witnessed in a parkway. There has to be some identification, some recourse for the blatant abuse of our public property. Thank you. And my other real concern is Center Street. I don't think the scooters should be allowed on the street or on the sidewalk. Well, they shouldn't be allowed on the sidewalk anyway, but I think they have to avoid Center Street. Our elderly want to be active. They want to walk to Coolidge Corner, and so do I.
Okay.
And we have to protect them. And this is highly dangerous. We have cyclists all over the place blatantly flaunting the laws. They go through red lights, they take left turns when there's no left turn, they go the wrong way down one-way street. We already have that hassle. Let's, if we're going to have this program, let's define it narrowly. Let's have identification. Let's be clear. I live on Winchester Street. In the whole length of this program, I have seen one scooter rider with a helmet.
Oh, I saw one.
Oh, you saw one too? Okay, so Cindy and I are at 3.
So, yeah. Thank you.
Now, the last question is, I get hit by a scooter. I got the guy's name. He's 18. What's my recourse? What's the insurance? Who do I sue? Who pays my medical bills? There's no no, if you identify them, if we get the scooters to be identified, the company can then identify the rider. But what's the recourse? I've identified the rider. He's 18. He's a student at BU. Do I sue his parents? No, he's 18. Does he have insurance? No, he doesn't. What's my recourse if I'm injured? All of these have to be addressed.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. So I just want to mention, I am delighted by the turnout for this public hearing, and so that everybody who wishes to speak can speak. I hope that you'll keep your comments as brief as possible to get your points across. Thank you.
I'll be brief. Bar Joswicki, and I'm with her.
Bar.
But
Joswicki.
and Dave, everybody, hi. I want to talk about the senior center and the biggest collection of affordable housing for seniors in the town, probably in the state, which is about to have 67 more units put in. What we need is the infrastructure of the town to catch up with these seniors, because the most comments I get from seniors is fear of scooters, and you know this. We have to get the infrastructure in Brookline to adapt to this on Winchester, coming from the senior center down, up to Fuller, right, and around the corner on Center Street. There's got to be a way that someone with a walker can go down those streets, or even up to Williams and the side streets, so that they can move without fear. And right now, there's a great deal of that. So not only consider Center Street, but the town has to make a way. I don't know if it's putting cars in the, putting cars in the different locations or whatever, but make that area have less fear for seniors. I mean, they're still going to fear, but
Right.
That specific area is what I'd like to work on.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comment.
Snyder, town meeting member, precinct 6.
Ruth Ann, can you speak closer to the mic, please?
Hi, everybody. I'm Ruth Ann Snyder, town meeting member, precinct 6, And I think I wanted to say, in response to the infrastructure stuff, I'm told that these scooter people are paying us $1 a day for each one of these scooters. $1 a day for each one of these scooters. I think they should be paying a very handsome price so we could repave our streets, which I now know are really in bad shape. But let them pay for it. Let us make a profit. This should be for the better good of our community. It shouldn't be for the better good of whatever private industry people get in charge of this. And I'll risk sounding paranoid by saying I think this is a great plot by the Republican administration not to have to expand public transportation. This is a wonderful way to alleviate. And if you've ever lived in an Asian city, which I have, you'll know that this is how people get around. This is how crowds of people get around. And this is the future that maybe you will, Sean, but none of the rest of us will be here for. It is going to happen. And I think with great tight regulations, it'll be perfect. But they should be paying us for the privilege as to repair our property. It should be their responsibility too.
Thank you very much for your comment. Yes, please. Yes.
My name's Martin Yacina, the 25 John Street. I've lived in Brookline for over 35 years. When Winston Churchill saw the hordes coming in to Europe, he didn't say, oh, there's a lot of Nazis in Poland and France and so on and so forth. We better let them in. That's not what he said. He said, no way. This town is supposed to be, from what I read over the last, since this contract was signed, we're a bellwether that's supposed to be leading the way about what's going to happen with electric scooters in the region, in the area. Well, we know about the electric scooters that they came in and arrogantly and duplicitously dumped their scooters on the streets of Somerville and dumped them on the streets of Cambridge. And what did Somerville and Cambridge do? They said, get the hell out. No, we took them. Now, they found a way to get into Brookline because Brookline has a reputation for having a very educated population, a very progressive population, a very forward-looking population. And now they're here. Now, interestingly, why did they come here? What was the reasons that were given to the select board for them to have come here? Well, the carbon footprint. The carbon footprint. They are going to decrease the carbon footprint. But as you've already just heard, and as was published in the patch last week, only 2 out of 10 people are avoiding using their cars for using these. 2 out of 10. So, in point of fact, if you want to use the car argument, well, I'm sorry, but these scooters are increasing the carbon footprint in this town. They are not decreasing the carbon footprint in this town. Now, interestingly, this is the Brookline Interim Operating Agreement signed by both Byrd and Lime after negotiations with Heather Hamilton and Todd Corain, and signed by every member of the sitting select board in February of this year, and signed by each of the representatives of the companies that are operating here, Lime and Byrd. And this is from the contract. I want you should understand this, what this says. It says that the company shall provide the town with web-accessed dashboard that includes in real time, and it goes down and it lists 10 different things. What's point 8? Please listen carefully. Point 8. It's going to provide member demographics, including age, sex, residential location for those residing in the town. Now, when I asked Todd Corain and Ms. Hamilton to provide that information. Oh, catch-22. We can't provide that information because Bird and Lime are party to the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations in Europe. Really? So European regulations are now driving what's going on in Brookline? Sorry. And yet, these very things of who the people are that are riding these scooters, who are they? Anybody with an eye can see that 85 to 90% of them are people between 18 and 30 years old. That's the demographic who's riding them. You don't see many 45 or 50-year-old people riding these scooters. Give me a break. So the fact is, what we really want to have here, the question is this a fun park for young people? And meanwhile, what's the moral calculus? What's the trade-off with all the trauma, all the upsetness throughout this town? What is the moral calculus here? Why does this 20-something subset, which is using these things basically for fun, have any right to traumatize the 80% of the people in the rest of the subset? Now, if we had the demographics and knew where people lived, we could know, hey, we would know, are these Brookline people who are riding? No, we can't know that. We don't know if 75% of them are Boston University kids living in the towers, do we? We don't know anything about it. Why? Because we can't get the information. This is European standards. Thank you, European standards. Well, I think this assertion, and by the way, Mr. Warren said this program was initiated on the advice of the Massachusetts, somebody in the Massachusetts Transportation Department. You try to find the name of the person in the Transportation Department here in Massachusetts who advised them. Try to get that name. Try to get that name. See if you can get it on paper. You won't be able to find it. All we know is this reference to, and Mr. Warren referred to this study group. Well, I got news for you. That study group that he referred to is a trade group. It's a trade group for private industry. These people want to be in here, and they're using us. They're using us to break into the region and to be able to say, see, Brookline did it, now it's okay, the rest of you people should be doing it. We're being taken to the cleaners by these people. They're duplicitous, they're arrogant, and they have one bottom line, and it is their bottom line. And to say that the people from this region, that this is coming, it doesn't have to be coming. It doesn't have to come to Brookline. And if Brookline puts its foot down and say, no, our people don't have to be traumatized by this. Our people don't have to be living in fear walking down the sidewalks. Our kids don't have to be in danger of being run over, as I almost was coming over here walking past Trader Joe's on the sidewalk. We don't have to put up with this. And anybody who says that we do and that we're not being progressive is not thinking about this issue and what's going on here and why we can't even get the basic information, the basic demographic information that would lead to sound public policy. So we've got a real issue here, and there's a lot of people in this town who I happen to know feel the same way that I do. And one final note, I can think of no motorized vehicle aside from a motorized unicycle or a hoverboard that is more dangerous on the roads anywhere than stand-up motorized scooters. We don't need this. The region doesn't need this. And if you look around and see what London did and what Paris has done and what towns all over the country are doing, you're going to find there's going to be a huge backlash, and these people may go out of business before it's over, because what they try to present as a tsunami of micro-transportation, this may be going in another direction. I thank you for your time. I'm sorry if I'm a bit adamant, but I've just really had it with us saying thank you.
I thank you very much for your comments.
Hi, good evening. My name is Adele Pike. I live at 25 Marion Street, so in the heart of Coolidge Corner. I sent my remarks, Madam Chairwoman, to your email box this morning, so I won't read the full amount, because many of my concerns have been and experiences have been expressed. But I do want to talk about where e-scooters are left on sidewalks. We've heard that they're left in the middle of the sidewalk. I have seen that innumerable times. I have followed the lead of the chair of the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, who, in a measure of citizenship, has encouraged us to move these scooters out of the way. They are heavy and they scream at you. And I'm tired of having bruised ankles. They are also parked in front of handicapped parking spaces, right, so that they would interfere with somebody getting out of a car. They are parked in front of hydrants. They are parked in front of neighborhood benches and benches on the sidewalk. They are parked in bus stops. And most concerning to me, they are parked in curb cuts. Within the last 5 weeks, within the last 2 weeks, I have seen right in front of Bank of America, in Coolidge Corner, that curb cut, 5 of them lined up as if the company had parked them there, right in the curb cut. I don't know how anybody who had any kind of a need for access to that cut that couldn't walk around it could have made it through. The other thing that concerns me is that so often they are parked so close to the crosswalk button that you can't get access to the button. I am not quite Medicare eligible, so I'm not very young, but I'm also not very old. And I am frightened of walking in my neighborhood, in Washington Square neighborhood, in Brookline Village, and down at St. Mary's. I am a pedestrian. I walk 3 to 4 miles every day for recreation and for errands, and I am frightened that somebody's going to come up behind me and knock me over. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. So, yes, sir. And then, sir, you can be after the speaker. So, next.
My name is Dan DeSenza, and my wife Diane and I have lived in Brookline forever, and we are Medicare eligible, and damn proud of it. I've got 3 questions for 3 people, if I could. For you, Sergeant, is there a list of injuries or accident injuries that the police department is keeping track of related to the scooters?
The police department is keeping track of the accidents. To my knowledge, there have not been any serious injuries to this point, but there have been some. Okay. But the number actually has been fairly low.
And second, I guess it's for Paul, is it?
Yep, that's me.
On the warrant article itself, you said that one of the criteria for going ahead with another pilot program or for a permanent program was for the legislature to pass new regulations governing the scooters.
Yep.
Is there any way to is the warrant article clear enough to determine how much of a change or how much of a regulation change is required in order?
So that's a great question. It's not prescriptive in what legislation should be passed, other than we're adamant about making sure that we maintain the rights to control our sidewalks. Remember, all the things that people are saying about the sidewalk operation and parking, that's where this warrant article is born from. So it's not prescriptive to the point, I would strongly suggest that you reach out to our delegation and say, this is what I want. Go to the hearings when they're actually, discussing this legislation and make sure that you're.
Okay. And my third question is for Heather. Heather, in June, I asked you if you had developed the criteria for judging the success or failure of the trial program. And I'm wondering if you're you said you were going to make them up at the end of the program. Are you any closer to bringing together in sort of an intellectually honest way how you're going to judge the success of the program?
Yes, please do.
Todd and I worked very diligently to come up with. I remember that we had come up with a matrix. I just didn't have it in front of me, as I don't really have it right now.
You were going to make it up after the program was over.
That's not exactly what I said. I said that we didn't have a hard and fast one. The delicate balance with a select board of 5 people that are all elected independently is that we eventually kind of have to have a conversation about what we agree on. And if 3 of us agree and something passes, then it holds. So we developed criteria in the beginning, and I'm going through the criteria with the other members to make sure that these are reflective of the things that they care about. And that includes accidents, injuries, the number of trips, a lot of the demographic information that we will collect as a result of the user survey and the non-user survey. And we've played around with whether or not the companies have been abiding by their contract with us. We've made tweaks mid-program as a result of the hearing that we had in June. We've put in more parking corrals to try to address some of these parking issues.
My question is a simple one. When do you think you're going to have in place the standards against which you will judge this program?
I expect us to have a conversation like in open session, either in December or January.
So in other words, I guess the answer to my question is no. You are not going to have the criteria for judging the success of this trial prior to the ending of the trial.
Well, it has been developed, but the select board needs to have a conversation in open session about what those criteria are. We have not voted on them as a board currently.
You do understand how you could
Yeah,
sort of the backward way to do stuff. You run a program,
Yeah.
and then you look at the data, and then afterwards you decide what the criteria for success
Yeah.
is. Usually the scientific method says you come up with your goal, what you're trying to study, and then you come up with a
Okay.
test, and then you run the experiment and to see how the results come out. To me, it's
Yeah.
intellectually,
Yeah.
it's wrong. It's simply wrong.
Yeah.
That's fine for, like science. This is real life.
I know.
And
I know.
and it's
Excuse me.
very difficult.
Yeah.
to do
I think
that
it
in a
really
perfect
breaks.
situation.
I appreciate your question, and I think it sort of breaks the continuity of having a public hearing to have this, within. And if you could. Okay. Thank you very much. Yes.
Hi, my name is Denise Springborg, and I'm in Precinct 1, so a neighbor of Ellen in St. Mary's area. And I have one question and one comment. The question is, how will the survey for the non-users be distributed? Like, how will people know to take this survey and that they have a voice?
Heather, I think you're up. Thank you.
So many of the mechanisms that we have at our disposal, since we don't have an unlimited pot of money, is our Twitter account, but the new SUFA signs that are out and about will post this. We will reach out to pretty much anyone who has contacted our e-scooter email address to report anything. And I believe the companies are going to be notifying their users. We're going to be notifying anyone who has come in contact with the town during this pilot program, and then additional, public awareness. But most people have to be somewhat tuned in order to get this. We don't have the money to do a mass mailing.
Could I ask a question about that? Will the survey be online?
Yes, we will probably have both online versions and hard copy.
Okay, and will the first page of the website contain a box that would tell people that there is this survey and where they can link up to do the survey?
We will definitely post it on our website as, something that if you're interested in taking, it'll take, hopefully 5 minutes.
And how much advance notice will people have about from the time the survey is produced to the time that they need to reply?
I would assume 2 to 3 weeks.
Thank you.
Okay,
I'll
thank you.
just say quickly that I know much of this has been reiterated, but it's not a bike. I can't hear it. I can't hear it coming up from behind me, and I can't tell you how many times on Beacon Street I've almost been hit or my dog has almost been hit. And they think that they can squeeze through because they're not a bike, but they can't.
Okay, thank you very much for your comment. Yeah, okay, and then, yes.
I'm Alan Elstein. I live on Sewell Avenue, and I have 3 brief remarks. The first is,
Okay.
I spent over 30 years assessing risk, and never mind fines. If people are not warned, you get into what's called contributory negligence, and I'll give you an example. If there's an 18-year-old, whether it's a male or a female, without a helmet driving on your street, and there's a pothole and they have a severe injury, the town, which has not been wildly enforcing, never mind fines, people with, the police really don't seem to have the time, as best my neighbors can tell me, is who's got the deep pockets? It's the town. And I don't know how many of you watch the daytime court drama shows, but guess who comes in? There's James Sokolov and all of these people. An 18-year-old can very easily declare bankruptcy. Who is the entity that has the deep pockets and may have some liability here? So this idea that the town is not taking on liability with lax enforcement, you have these rules and there's so many of these people, you're not enforcing it. So I would suggest that if I knew somebody in a wheelchair, maybe they're not going to sue the 18-year-old, but maybe they're going to sue the town. All you need is the type of notoriety we have with these other things. The other thing I would say is at Coolidge Corner, where you've got all of these nice little trees planted, the roads are fairly narrow anyway, and I really feel for the people that have talked about scooters whizzing by. My own experience is I walk a lot. I've had several experiences, and I'll just add to what they had. I live on Sewell Avenue. I'm walking toward Kent Street. There are some bushes blocking Kent Street.
Yes.
And this is a middle-aged man, so we're not talking teenagers now. He's zipping down the sidewalk. I see a shadow from the thing. I jump back. My suspicion is, they say 20 miles an hour. This person was going at least 25. If I hadn't jumped back, guess who was going to take the impact from that? In summary, my concern here is it's all well and good to talk about this warrant, but we have this problem here and now. I personally have come very close to being injured several times. And the problem is here and now, and what I just heard back here is we're talking about, these are seniors that are going to be commenting on this. We heard, well, they can do through Twitter or maybe through a web account. When we worked on the Stop and Shop versus the school, that's not how the school was stopped from being a Stop and Shop. It was from actual physical things where older people who had taxes to pay could comment. I don't think Twitter and a website is sufficient. And those are my comments.
Thank you very much. I believe that Heather mentioned that there would be hard copies as well, acknowledging that not everybody is tuned into the website. So I thank you for your comments. Yes.
Hi, my name is Cindy Lee. I live on Babcock Street. I am a member of the Transportation Board, but I'm speaking strictly on my own behalf as a resident. I have thought long and hard about it, and I'm listening to what everybody is saying in here. I do support the Warrant Article, but there are so many more issues that was raised that I didn't even think about, and even in my wildest dreams. I hear about a woman, I believe she may have left, I think your husband's in a wheelchair and he can't go down a sidewalk. I have a handicapped spot in front of my house for my mother and my sister. There was one that was left blocking it. I called, I believe it was Lime at the time, and young kid, it was a Sunday afternoon around 1 o'clock, and he said to me, "What do you want me to do? I'm in California." I'm like, okay. I refused to move it. I shouldn't have to move it. I called the police, and they were very nice. They were going to send somebody out. In the interim, they actually did end up sending a young kid to remove it. I had another time where it was left in the gutter of the handicap spot, and I called, and a gentleman in a Lexus SUV drove up and threw it in the back of his car. That is not cutting down on emissions. I think that the underlying, what I feel is underlying in this room, is that we want the safety of our sidewalks back. We don't want to walk in fear of having a scooter behind us. My mother walks out of the house. Now I am so scared getting her into the car that if there's a scooter coming down, they're going to knock her over, let alone my sister. I live in an area where there's a lot of BU students. They ride the street, 2 of them on a scooter, weaving in and out, down Babcock Street. I do believe they're supposed to be riding in bike lanes. They're not in bike lanes. I think the idea of a survey, I think we should have Lime and Bird pay for it. Have it sent to every single resident in Brookline. Because if you are sending a survey to the users, they're going to say they love it. You need somebody like my mom to answer a survey. My mother will not go online. You need to have it mailed to every single person. All 60,000 residents of Brookline. If you only survey a small portion of 10%, it's going to skew the results and not be accurate. A lot of things that people said in here, I totally agree with. I'm not going to repeat regarding who pays if they're hurt. The poor woman who has to move a scooter to get out of her house. The fear of walking to Coolidge Corner, the senior center. Even myself, I walk home from Coolidge Corner every single day when I come home from work. And I'm like, okay, is there going to be a kid riding up behind me? I've spoken to them. Some of them are very nice when I tell them to get off the sidewalk. One actually scared me, is how rude he was to me. And I was just like, okay, I'm just going to continue watering my front lawn because I'm not going to face that. But you had raised a very important issue. I think that we have to look at surveying the entire town, having the 2 companies pay for it. I think that we need to get back the safety of our sidewalks. And everybody says the disabled, I'm not disabled, the elderly and the kids. I think it's every single one of us. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you're 4, doesn't matter if you're 54. Everybody in this town has a right to walk down a sidewalk safely, not in fear. And I think that's absolutely ridiculous if somebody who wants to walk down any street, Beacon Street, and is fearful that they're going to get hit by a scooter. We have to look at hard and long at this before we allow this in Brookline. I think that the Warrant Article, which I support, is heading in the right direction. There's many questions that have to be answered out there. I know it's in a state of flux, but for now, I think that because people are looking at Brookline to see how this pilot program is going, that we can set the standard for the rest of the state. If Brookline does this, other people will follow us. It will make it safe for Cambridge. It will make it safe for Somerville and Newton. So let Brookline start this, and the way we can start this is to get them off the sidewalk and let pedestrians of all ages and abilities to walk freely.
I thank you for your comment. Thank you.
Hi, John Harrison. I've lived in Brookline for 27 years. I am a huge advocate for for scooters and other micromobility devices. I also am in support of Warrant Article 16. In fact, I would make it better. I would have a third resolved clause in there, asking the resolve that we urge the state legislature to expedite the regulation of the scooters so we can get them on. You know, they're coming, they're already here. And by the way, I do want to point out that we're not debating the issue of will we have scooters, e-scooters in Brookline or not. No, we're just debating the issue of whether we'll have scooter share. People are already voting with their pocketbooks, and if there have been 150 trips already, and that means there's a huge demand there. In terms of the, let's see, state regulation that I am urging, be completed as soon as possible. That should include such things as the maximum speed for the scooters. Should scooter people be licensed? Should they be required to have a driver's license, which would solve the age issue, by the way? Should the scooters have registration plates on them, just as cars do? And should the rider or vehicle, whichever it is, be insured? Should helmets be required? The issue of lights, the issue of turn signals, this all should be regulated at the state level. And I'm fully in support of that. Basically, scooters, it's the scooter share companies made a huge tactical error, I think, in only bringing in models that had seats, because what that did was let people who, the elderly, people who perhaps have balance issues, et cetera, strength issues, have an us versus them, that scooters are not for us. Well, this is a scooter. This is an 80-plus-year-old man who lives near the JFK house, and he teaches at BU, and every day his commute, he jumps on his seated scooter, boom, to work and back every single day. Also, Hugh Madison, who many of you know, has, I think, probably the exact same model of seated scooter, and he would love to have anybody take a test ride on it. He's a huge advocate of these things as well. I also want to point out, this is a micromobility device. It's a bicycle with a kind of a wheelchair in the front. You've seen those. This is micromobility as well. This is a bicycle, an electric bike, as a matter of fact. And when you're talking about electric scooters, electric bikes and electric scooters are basically the same, just a different, you stand versus sitting. And with a trailer, towing a child. So this is all micromobility. This is all, the regulation should cover all of that stuff. Let's see, I think, as I said, I think the Lime, Bird, and Spin have made a huge tactical error in only bringing in the models that you had to stand on. If they had models with seats and with baskets, then the seniors, people with physical disabilities, I would tend to think anybody except for the blind could find a micromobility device that they could ride, and it would be hugely liberating for everybody. I'm a member of a couple of committees at the Senior Center, and all the time there is talk about how the seniors, it's so hard to get around, and I have to call the ride, and they're late, and I miss my appointment. Well, jump on your seated scooter, and boom, you get there on time. It's got a basket on it. You can go and get your groceries or whatever right afterwards. So, and that leads me to, your comment leads me to, here, I do want to say that one of the scooter companies, Lime, has now had, I think, 4 or 5 safety training things on Saturday mornings, and I've attended, I think, just about every single one. And I do need to report that basically the majority of attendees have been old enough to have their own children, and I think that's very important for us to know. So it's not just the kids. It's definitely not just the kids. And the proportion of folks old enough to have their own children has been increasing with each one of these safety trainings that company has held. Finally, I guess I'd like to conclude, climate change. Basically, transportation accounts for 43% of Massachusetts carbon emissions. And in the Boston area, including Brookline, a recent survey found that about 50% of car trips are 3 miles less. This is perfect micromobility. Perfect. It's crazy to jump on your car to go a half a mile to the supermarket or whatever. It's just environmentally very, very irresponsible. And I do want to point out also the equity and cost issue. Micromobility is not either or. Scooters are not either or. People who own a car can keep their car. They can also, not a single person has complained about the cost of e-scooters, rather the scooter share or buying them. They're very cheap. You spent $400 for his, and I'm told that his model is now on Amazon for $320. So, and the scooter share companies are very inexpensive. So, what you can do is both keep your car and also have access to a scooter either by buying or renting, and then any given trip you just decide which one makes the most sense. And the more trips you avoid with your car, the better we are for the environment. And then here's the final thing I would say, is that basically I think there is something we can agree on, and I would hope that we would, which is basically the issue of safety. The sidewalks should definitely be safe for pedestrians. There is no question about that. However, they also need to be safe for the person who was a pedestrian yesterday and rents a scooter today. Okay, I should say the road should be safe. The transportation should be safe for the person who is on the scooter. And as part of the data collection for the pilot, I kind of requested, and I'm not sure we'll get it, but it'd be nice, is when the police department stops somebody for riding on the sidewalk, to ask them, why are you not on the road? Okay? When I brought that possibility up at a meeting at the senior center about scooters, one of the police officers present said, oh, we already know. We know what they'll tell us. They'll tell us the roads are too dangerous. Okay? So, and again, we want everybody to be safe. So basically, should be united, I think, in this three-part situation. On all of our major roads, we should have on the outside sidewalks which are perfectly safe for pedestrians. We already have that. We should have in the center a fast-moving lane, one lane in each direction for moving cars and trucks. We already have that. But what we need to do in between is we need to have a safe and separate lane for micromobility vehicles, for scooters, bikes, wheelchairs, all of the specialized bicycles for the disabled, et cetera, et cetera. A safe lane for those people. That way, everybody is safe, everybody's moving at the appropriate speed, and we're all good. And I think what we hope to do, we'd make the best progress if we all unite on that. Thank you.
I thank you for your comments. All right, I will give, yes, chair's prerogative, yes. Yes. Yeah. Cindy, can you come up so?
When you went to those shows when they were showing how to ride a scooter?
The safety training?
Yeah. Did they have any helmets, and did they tell them not to ride on the sidewalk?
Yes, both are true. That particular company actually gave helmets to every attendee.
Which company was that?
It was Lime, and there's a rep from Lime here as we speak. And I wish the other two companies did comparable training. So, and what was about riding on the sidewalk? Yeah, every single time, and especially, I noticed it. I think the first of the trainings was days after the first public hearing on the 6th floor on the issue of scooters. And what I noticed is that every single concern, sidewalks, was addressed at the next safety training and has been since.
Right,
So,
it's because I actually saw one of them, and I asked them, and they never.
You saw one of what?
They were at College Corner at Devotion School. They have a display on that big CVS near the movie
companies
theater.
did? The companies? Okay.
And I forget which one. I'm not going to say which one, even if I remember.
Okay.
But when I asked them about the helmet and about telling people not to ride on the sidewalk, they told me they didn't say anything. That's why I want to know what you said, because I don't think they're.
I was present for 4 of them, and there may have been one I missed, but on every single one of the ones I was present for, A, they gave away helmets. They encouraged people to take them and to wear them when they scooted, and B, they definitely mentioned don't ride on the sidewalk.
Yeah, I got a totally different thing, and I was asking as a resident, not as anything else.
Thank you for that clarification. Oh, yes, please. Yes, there is, yes.
Hi. I'm a resident here since 2012.
Could you introduce yourself, please?
Okay. I arrived here in 2012, and I was tickled pink. My main reason for living where I live, right next to the Riverway, the Longwood T-stop, is to be able to walk the Riverway path, which I guess started as a bicycle path, and now it's an everything path, rollerblades, you know how it is. So I honestly, I'm scared for my life. Before the scooters came, the bicycles shoot by, they don't ring a bell, and if they do, you can't hear it. And they just don't care. They're like this close to you, and the wind alone can push you over. And there are families with baby buggies and extended grandparents, aunts, uncles, they're all walking, having a good day. And it's just, many people have given wonderful solutions and suggestions. I'm agreeing with a lot of them. I don't know, honestly, I thought I had a solution, but after hearing all of this, I don't really have a suggestion except that it's dangerous on the Riverway and everywhere else. And about the comment that the company who makes those
The scooters?
Scooters should send out survey at their expense, they should include a return envelope.
Yes.
So it's just scary. It really is scary. And what you said about the bushes, some of the bushes go halfway into, you have to actually get off the sidewalk into the street and watch out for oncoming cars and scooters and everything else, because you can't walk on the sidewalk. That's another matter. That's not your.
That's beyond this public hearing.
So I'm glad to be here. I love Brookline. I love walking everywhere, and I walk, like somebody said, like at least 5 miles a day to errands and so. But I don't want to be scared for my life. So I know I'm repeating what everyone else has said. Thank you.
I thank you for taking the time to be here. Yes, please.
I'm Allison Plant. I live at 103 Walnut Street. So I actually have ridden these scooters a couple times. I'm not sure if I missed the beginning, so I don't know if anyone else has mentioned it. So in my case, and I did wear a helmet both times, and I did ride in the bike lane. So I apparently it was probably me that the two people who saw the person with the bike helmet saw both times, because I too have only ever seen one other person that was following all the rules. So in my case, one time it was to get from Brookline Village to Coolidge Corner. Otherwise, I would have taken a bus. So in my case, yeah, I did not displace a car. The other time I was going to from Brookline Village again to different destination. If the scooter hadn't been there, I would have walked or brought my bike with me. My husband also owns a scooter, so we have one at home as well. So my take on this is that I agree. I think scooters in general have great kind of benefits in certain cases. I think when used safely, they can be really great. The thing I'm most concerned about is the share aspect and the way it's been implemented for a few reasons. One is that, and I'll try to just stick to the reasons that haven't already been said. So one is that I think the very nature of them just sort of being everywhere, essentially what that encourages is people who make a last-minute decision. So it's not, in my case, I planned way ahead, and I brought my helmet, and I knew exactly where I was going to find the scooter and go to and leave it. But in most cases, it's like, oh, here's a scooter, that might be fun. Let me jump on that. Those people are not going to have helmets. That's really what I've seen a lot of other people doing. I've definitely seen a lot of first-time scooter riders. It's not. It's different than riding a bicycle, so it's not a difficult thing to do entirely, but it's also not trivial. I found the first time I rode it that it was very challenging, and so in fact when my husband got his, I recommended that he start on a bike path off the road and have the chance to kind of do trial and error. So I've seen lots of people who like try to get it started and they're there without their helmets and they're clearly there for the first time, and I'm worried about what's going to happen the first time they hit the pothole. The thing about the potholes is that, or any kind of blemish in the road, these are the scooters that these 3 companies use have hard plastic tires. So any bump in the road you hit, it feels much less secure than being on a bicycle or being on a type of scooter that has the air-filled wheel. So when we bought ours for our kind of own use, we picked one with air-filled tires. But I think that's another thing that may not be evident is that I think these were designed in in warmer states with sort of less salt erosion of the roads. I think there are definitely states that it makes much more sense potentially to have the share aspect. I don't think it makes sense for us in this kind of formerly cowpath salt eroded environment. So though I'm and then the final thing I'll say is just that so living where I am, this is actually my 3rd meeting of the week. I'm not usually somebody who goes, this is actually the first time I've ever spoken at a town hearing like this, other than to present something at the Historical Commission if I needed to make a change to my house. So we are in the middle of sort of a perfect storm where I live. We have all these overlapping construction projects causing one sort of area of challenge. We have NETA causing another area of challenge. Now we have the scooters. So I would just love if we could not do any more pilots of anything in the town. So I'm very much in favor of this warrant article, and I would go further and say, like, can we please just put a moratorium on, like, no more sofas, no bikes, no pot shops. Just let's just live for a little bit and let the police have a break, and I don't have to call them every 5 times a day. So so that would be great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your comment, which gives it definitely a different perspective than we've heard so far. Yes.
I'm Sean Lynn Jones, town meeting member from Precinct 1, and I've chaired enough subcommittee hearings and other public hearings over the years to have given a lot of advice, never repeat all the comments that other people have made. So I'll take my own advice and say I'm not going to repeat the many, many excellent points that you've heard. I've actually heard them many times from my neighbors in Precinct 1, a few of whom were here tonight and maybe still are here in some cases to make these comments about the scooters. Warrant Article 16, which I hope you will recommend, I hope the advisory committee will recommend it, and then I hope town meeting will vote on it with favorable action, is necessary but by no means sufficient. It's just a first step. It's the beginning of a long process to address this issue. All of what we've heard tonight is important to take into account. I'll just add 2 points that I don't think really came through as clearly as they should. For emphasis, I'll make them now. When it comes to the data, the accident rate matters, the injury rate matters, and the severity of those injuries, that's all important. But what doesn't get captured in that data is the near miss rate, which seems to bother so many people, including me, because I've almost been hit a few times from behind just stepping out of Walgreens and having people flying through the sidewalk in the parking lot there. You're not going to capture that with anything that looks at the raw numbers, but the fear factor that really bothers people. And the second, final, and general point is there are a lot of trade-offs here between, mobility, the needs of various groups, how our transportation system is used. When we make those trade-offs, though, we've got to keep our eye on the fundamental point. We're trying to maximize the quality of life here in this town, and that's what should guide us when we try to weigh these competing interests and come up with the best approach to scooters, e-scooters. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. Brief and to the point. My role model.
Oh, I'm going to be the last speaker. I'm Scott Ananian, town meeting member from Precinct 10, and perhaps one of the most mythical creatures around, in that I both use scooters regularly to get places instead of driving. In fact, I often use them to come down the street here to Town Hall. I've gone shopping and carried stuff back in my backpack on a scooter. I use the bike lanes and wear a helmet because my kids will yell at me if they see me not doing that. So these people exist, and I suspect that you will hear a lot more from them after November 15th. What bothers me about this article is, so far, I am not convinced that the participants in this debate have been a full cross-section of our community. I think it's, we've had something in excess of 35,000 scooter trips in town, and those people generally do not know that people are talking about scooters here tonight, and from my experience, don't know that the scooters are going to suddenly disappear on November 15th. I think to the representatives of the scooter companies, you guys should be doing a much better job advertising these. For example, you can see on almost any Lime scooter in the town, there's a little tag that gives you a discount code for it. If they put tags on those telling the people that, like, there's scooter hearings on a certain day and the scooters will go away if you don't show up, I think you'd get a very different cross-section of people here. I agree there are concerns about enforcement. The point which I do not agree with the proposed warrant article is that we are powerless to do anything about it until the state acts. We already have a number of town bylaws and enforcement authority delegated to the police in many cases to enforce those town bylaws. If the only thing which is preventing us from ticketing riders who are on the sidewalk, for example, is that there's not a clear state law about that, we should come back in the spring with a town bylaw and empower our police to actually enforce the laws the way that we wish them to be enforced. So I don't think it's worth. I don't think it's a good policy to put in to take this out of our hands and put an open-ended warrant article like this that says they're going away and who knows when they're coming back, maybe never. It depends on when the state decides to do something. To that end, I think some of the emphasis on helmets is perhaps a little misplaced. The current state law doesn't require helmets for adults riding scooters. It only requires them for children. Adults riding bicycles, only for children riding bicycles. And I hear from our friendly former town meeting members who are now in the State House that the proposed state law is likely to regulate scooters exactly the same way as bicycles. So the helmet law is likely to be a sort of Brookline specific quirk. That said, we can put it in our town bylaws if we think it's important. But certainly I was on a trip to Stockholm a couple weeks ago, and you see in that context, scooter culture is the same as bike culture. People don't habitually wear helmets because they use both bikes and scooters too frequently for that. And you find some amount of misbehavior, but you find the same misbehavior with bikes and scooters. So you find bikes chained to railings in places and obstructing sidewalks, and you find scooters obstructing sidewalks. And so I think it's unfortunate in our town that we have sort of pitted scooters as this separate thing, where we do like bikes in our town, and to the extent that we are successfully getting more people to ride bikes, the same issues that we're coming across with scooters are going to come across. We need to solve the problem. Let's not just pretend that scooters are the only thing which is causing these things. Yeah, those were my notes. Those are the 5 things I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Scott, thank you. Is there, yes, Zoe.
Hello. I'm sorry I came in late, so I've missed it. Sounds like a very interesting dialogue today. I just need to comment on a couple things for the committee.
Oh,
if that's
just
okay.
Introduce yourself for the...
Yeah. So I'm Zoe. What's that? Oh, this is being recorded. Wonderful. I'm Zoe Lynn, the Town Sustainability Program Administrator. I just wanted to highlight a couple things. Scott had mentioned 3,500 rides on the e-scooters. The number is over 150,000 since pilot launch. That number's been growing, obviously, so as staff I've been informed of that. The other thing I wanted to highlight for the committee, since they are reviewing a number of warrants that I'm staffed on, is the Select Board held a Sustainability and Climate Action Summit on June 5th. A series of warrants came, a series of recommendations came from the community. 160 people, staff were present, and Warrant Article 31 was a very one of the outcomes of the summit that you guys will be hearing on October 15th. It's a hub of 6 warrants that you guys are reviewing. I think you guys have 3 of them assigned to you, the subcommittee. 2, and so the...
Oh, no, we have 3. You're right.
Yeah, so the Warrant Article 31 talks about a vision for sustainable transportation to address climate change, health, equity, and integrated long-term 30-year planning. And then 5 other warrants are kind of spokes coming off of that. 2 of them are EV warrants, EV zoning, and then EV open-air parking. There's one on the scooters that talks that you're hearing obviously tonight. And then there's one on upkeeping paint markings for multimodal use across streets like crosswalks, and one on parking, which I recognize some of those you won't see, but when it goes to the full advisory, if you're understanding that Warrant Article 31 is a centerpiece and these other ones are supporting it for a long-term vision, and it's a very integrated set of pieces, and as you prepare your report, if you have integrated feedback on how this whole piece works, how we can plan over the next 30 years to achieve this need, this mode shift, as Warrant Article 31 talks, that will be very helpful.
Thank you very much. That's helpful.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here who would like to make a comment? Yes, please.
My name is Marcia Shanbaum, and I live on Babcock Street. And I moved here with my late mother because Brookline was safe for elders, and that was the reason. And I'm just kind of appalled to learn that there's no redress if a scooter knocks somebody down, that they can't be sued. I just thought, with all the intelligence and progressive nature of Brookline councils and the select board, such a thing wouldn't have been allowed without. We need numbers, we need licenses, or some means of identification, and some means of redress should these motorized vehicles cause injury. And that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this point, I'd like to close the public hearing so that we can discuss what we've heard tonight, and also to discuss vote on a recommendation to the full advisory. The way this works, for those who aren't familiar with the process, is that the subcommittees hold the public hearings, and then we bring back a recommendation to the full advisory committee, who then has another discussion. So, who would like to comment? Elisa?
Actually, I have a few questions. First of all, what do you feel that you can enforce currently?
The police department currently enforces prohibiting scooters from operating on the sidewalk. They also enforce riders not having a helmet and riders being under 18.
And is that based on the state law?
It's based on a combination of Chapter 90 laws and the town bylaws. So between those two.
So the bylaws would be the sidewalks, and Chapter 90 would be the helmet?
Correct. They're a little intertwined, whereas Chapter 90 would makes definitions of what they determine to be a motor vehicle. So you can use that for a definition, whereas the town bylaw would then say a motor vehicle, I'm just using an example, is not allowed on the sidewalk. So you're using both parts of the law in order to make the enforcement decisions.
So is the problem, do the police feel uncomfortable catching people who are on the scooters who are on the sidewalks, or I'm just wondering where the stumbling block is?
Comfortability issue. It's more of a practicality issue. If someone is operating on the sidewalk and they're going 10, 20 miles an hour, a police officer is not going to pursue them on foot and not going to pursue them in a police cruiser, because both would be unsafe and really impractical. Most of our enforcement stops have been when the officer sees someone coming towards them and feels safe that they can safely stop that person without injury to either the officer, the scooter rider, or people around them. So it's a practicality issue
So even if we had regulations in town that were stricter, the enforcement would be limited?
It's a difficult law to enforce in the fact that the violators are very mobile, but not mobile enough that someone is going to pursue.
And is that unlike a bike? If a bike was on the sidewalk, because
it's
they're
very
easier to...
Very similar. A police officer is not going to pursue someone on a bicycle because it actually creates a more dangerous situation than just the person on the bicycle by himself.
Did you have a follow-up to that?
Yeah, just on that point alone, do you have any recommendations as to how the police could more effectively enforce any regulations related to motorized scooters?
That would not be something that I'd be prepared to comment on at this time.
And also, how many hours has the police spent since this program began in April, strictly on enforcing the use of scooters?
While I don't have a specific time, I can tell you that there have been over 500 interactions with people on scooters since April, where officers have at a minimum stopped and talked to the operator of the scooter for whatever violation was occurring.
And did you give out more than just warnings?
I do not have that data. It could have been anything from a verbal warning to a written fine. I do not have the percentages of what was issued.
What are the fines? I thought we heard that we didn't have fines.
Well, there is a fine for town bylaw violations that can be issued.
So would this be for this being on the sidewalk?
That would be for operating on a sidewalk. There are, I will call them enforceability issues with whether or not someone then pays the fine. So some people will say that it's not enforceable, and they may mean that someone could get a fine, but then they just throw it in the trash.
And why is that less enforceable than a traffic ticket for a car?
Traffic tickets are monitored by the state, and there's a database that the Registry of Motor Vehicles would enforce motor vehicle violations.
Because there's people who they've registered their cars.
Correct.
So.
Well, they have licenses, they have cars, they have several different means of enforcing their laws, whereas under town bylaws, there's not that mechanism.
We also within the town have access to outside parties who do also do collections of fines for us. Yeah. Did you have a follow-up or?
I just had some comments. But
Okay. Yes. No.
It's on totally different
Yes.
topics, so perhaps other. Okay. One point that I wanted to make that hasn't been made here is I know that in some places out in the western part of the nation and in some foreign cities that this program has been considered helpful, having rental e-scooters. But I think that the geography of Brookline makes it a very hospitable atmosphere and environment for e-scooters. Our roads, aside from a major street like Beacon Street, and our sidewalks tend to be very narrow. Often a tree well will take up half of a block. And so we also have public transportation down the middle of our widest roadway in the form of trolleys. So when you take into account all of the competing transportation types of vehicles that are competing for the same very limited space, it seems that adding a new element to this already complicated and restricted group of transportation options is going to create additional problems that may be difficult to and what we currently have worse rather than improving the options. I know that there are ways that we can perhaps solve the problem of liability insurance if we require rental companies to pay for liability insurance and then include that in the fees that people pay. But in terms of enforcing it, as our police officer here has said, that would be critical to actually making use of the insurance, unless, of course, we are going to permit anyone injured to directly sue the companies who are renting it. Additionally, I'm concerned about the ADA implications. I think that by making it more hazardous and blocking passageways that the town is legally required to make accessible for people with disabilities, that the town will be liable for a class action suit. And I think that we need to take very seriously our accessibility requirements as a town, and that needs to be a factor in any decisions going forward.
Thank you. David, Mark, do you have any particular comments? Yes, and we've gotten a lot of letters as well, which I have put into the town's database, so that your comments will be known not just by the subcommittee, but by the people gathering the data. I am a social scientist myself. That is my background, and so I appreciate that public hearings bring out certain, disproportionately certain parts of the population. And that's another reason why I think one of the things that I liked most about what we heard tonight is the value of really surveying the entire population of Brookline when we're talking about the quality of life of all of the residents in Brookline. I think it's really important to hear from everybody. We're going to have both ends of the spectrum, the most, the ones who most want this and the people that who most don't want it, attend these kinds of hearings and maybe write the letters. But it would be very good for us to know more broadly how it's being viewed in the town, and I hope that that is picked up on and somehow figured out for us to do in Brookline. The other comment I think about a lot is the way we are struggling with getting bike lanes in Brookline. There's so many areas of the town where our roads are so narrow that we have a lot of shallows on streets where you would really want a dedicated bike lane, like Longwood, for instance, which has a tremendous amount of traffic going to and from the medical area. And so I think that it's important for us to be really creative as we think about this. And frankly, that's one of the things I like about this warrant article, is that it doesn't take a position, as the petitioner said at the beginning, but it begins, it gives us a way to step back a little bit and really assess and learn more and figure out how to proceed in Brookline, whether this is in fact something that we can accomplish to to the well-being of the residents of this town. And so if there are no further discussions, Elisa?
The one thing I do have to say is that I haven't had much exposure to e-scooters because I am in that far away part of Brookline, of South Brookline. But given the weight of these scooters and the speed which they can go, I'm not just worried about the pedestrians, I'm worried about the scooter drivers. I am really amazed that we have allowed scooters to be on the roads without any kind of regulations about it. It seems like people should be getting trained before they're on the scooter, because going on a scooter, I've been on an electric bike and I fell over because it was so heavy. So there's some basic things that I just really think we need to do. We do it for cars. I don't understand why we shouldn't do it for other forms of transportation. So I think anyone who's on a scooter should be trained, and they could have a license so that whenever they want to sign up for a shared scooter, they can put in their license number. I mean, the liability insurance, seems like a no-brainer. I'm really torn about what to do about sidewalks versus streets, because our town has not made the commitment to do bike lanes. That really is what we need, and because people on scooters are pretty vulnerable, to be on streets is dangerous, just like it is for bikes. But to be on sidewalks is really dangerous, both for the scooter driver and for the pedestrian. But we're doing sharrows, which is completely inadequate, and I think we have to, if we've decided that we want to provide alternative forms of transportation, we're just going to have to make the investment to make that a safe option, and we haven't done that to date, and I'm really sorry that the town hasn't. And I know when I bike to Cambridge, I feel a sense of relief because they've put in a lot more investment than we have in making it safe for bicyclists, pedestrians, and scooters, which I guess aren't even used. So I support the idea of having alternative forms of transportation, but I think that we also have to be mature about it and create infrastructure that we need to make it safe. So,
yeah, before we take a vote, Zoe, did you want to make just a brief comment?
Yeah, there were several things that came up kind of in questions in your commentary, and I just wanted to share the information. So I, as the Sustainability Program Administrator, get calls on crosswalk violations or idling or different things. And so as in my duties to help the town, my responsibilities to help the town achieve zero emissions by 2050, we've started tackling this more integrated planning that you guys were all kind of referencing on protected bike lanes. How would we do it? We do have these narrow streets. How could we start planning for that and make that work to protect all users, safety and other things. And as part of this, that was the result of Warrant Article 31 that, again, I mentioned you will see. That is setting a vision, so then we can start then coordinating that vision through the CIP and other next steps that we need to do. But I wanted to also comment, as a result of all this, I've been in conversations with Police Chief Lipson on how we would handle enforcement, because obviously this is a complicated issue and there's different conversations going around. Nothing's been decided, but one would be potentially over time we start phasing in new officers that are on bicycle in neighborhoods that could do enforcement for pedestrian, bicycles, scooters, as well as other neighborhood needs, not necessarily driving, but and this is just in dialogue right now, very early stages since. Okay. Okay, good. Yeah, thank you for the update. Yeah, so, and then maybe over the next few years phase in additional officers for the safety. So the troubleshooting has begun in an effort to get the infrastructure there, to start planning for it long term, to figure out how we could integrate these users in a safe way, and then get the officers they need to be able to enforce it. We are in spaces that we're troubleshooting new areas, and that always is challenging. So
thank you.
Yeah.
I also wanted to give the petitioner an opportunity to make a final comment before we do our vote.
I think just briefly on some of the comments about existing regulations and how we're kind of hodgepodging things together and cobbling them together to do enforcement. We can't have our cake and eat it too. When the town says that the scooters on the street do not apply to state law 90E, and that's why they're on it, they're allowed because they're not supposed to be on the street because they have turn signals by state law. We can't reference the same state law to do enforcement. It just doesn't work. So it actually highlights, and I do appreciate all that police are doing there. They've been put in a very difficult situation. I've had two phone calls with Chief Lipton about this issue. We've had extensive conversations about how to deal with enforcement, very much in line with what and Zoe and I talked about this about 2 weeks ago, that we need investment. Exactly what you said. You can't run after a scooter going down the sidewalk, and you can't go after them with an automobile, with a cruiser. There is a concept of creating a specialized group within police department that is probably bike-based or scooter-based that would be used to enforce not only scooters. Scooters is not the core issue here. It is infrastructure.
Right.
And making sure that bike lanes aren't blocked so that people feel safe to be able to go into the bike lanes, even the protected bike lanes. Someone had mentioned earlier that if you ask a scooter rider why they're on the sidewalk, they're probably going to tell you because they don't feel safe in the street. And this is really, and I appreciate what you said, this is an infrastructure, primarily an infrastructure issue. And enforcement, no matter what we do, you're never going to have enough enforcement to deal with all the issues. But we do have to at least set a clear expectation around what the expectations are, and then we can start enforcing. So I do appreciate the hearing.
I thank you for bringing this warrant article to us. Yes. If you wish to do that, we did not receive anything in writing, and you would need to clear it with the moderator or somebody first whether they would allow it. That would expand the warrant article, and in general we don't expand it once.
Well, sometimes you never know. Check with the moderator.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Okay.
You should check with the moderator.
Yeah.
And see whether...
If that could be added, then it would have to be added in the more formal way, John, if you wanted to do that. Thank you. Okay.
I just wanted to thank you very much for taking the time to hear everyone that came out and to hear us. It's not easy sitting in that chair. I have had the pleasure.
Yes.
Better chairs than we have downstairs.
Very true. Very true. But transportation is very nuanced. It's very fascinating, at least in my opinion. And there are a lot of things that go into the choices that we make. And protected infrastructure is one of them. One of my biggest frustrations when I hear a lot of the complaints is that people don't put that same lens against all of the other modes. So I see bad behavior in cars, on bikes. If I had a friend that was on the Esplanade and got hit by a bicyclist and she broke her arm, she didn't realize it until she went to the hospital. But what was her recourse? She got stuck with the bill. So these are public policy challenges for us. But the demand that we've seen really necessitates us to look at how we are allocating the public right-of-way. And I am fully in support of protecting our sidewalks for those vulnerable users, but vulnerability comes in all shapes and sizes, and the micromobility is not held to the same standard as a motor vehicle. A motor vehicle is designed for high speeds and to prevent someone from losing their life at that high speed, and yet we use them for trips under 4 miles for the most part. And so we're doubling down on a method of moving goods and people that don't really make sense given all that we know about the impact that it's having on all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heather. All right. Go for it, David.
I did earlier.
Yes.
I'm waiting for a second.
All right. Second. All right. So, all in favor of supporting warrant article 16? Elisa?
Yes.
Yes. David Mark? Susan?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. It is 4 unanimous. So thank you very much, all of you, for taking the time to be here.